Hello, I'm here to guide you into your nap, rest, or peace. Author, Guy Demay. Story, Fear. We went up on deck after dinner. Before us the Mediterranean lay without a ripple and shimmering in the moonlight. The great ship glided on, casting upward to the star-studded sky a long serpent of black smoke. Behind us the dazzling white water, stirred by the rapid progress of the heavy bark and beaten by the propeller, foam seemed to writhe, gave off so much brilliancy that one could have called it boiling moonlight. There were 6 or 8 of us silent with admiration, gazing toward faraway Africa, whither we were going. Commandant, who was smoking a cigar with us, briskly resumed the conversation begun at dinner. Yes, I was afraid then. My ship remained for 6 hours on that rock, beaten by the wind, and with a great hole in the side. Luckily, we were picked up toward evening by an English coaler, which sighted us. Then a tall man of sunburned face and grave demeanor, one of those men who have evidently traveled unknown, far-away lands, whose calm eye seems to preserve in its depth something of the foreign scenes it has observed. A man that you are sure is impregnated with courage spoke for the first time. You say, Commandant, that you were afraid? I beg to disagree with you. You are in error as to the meaning of the word and the nature of the sensation that you experience. An energetic man is never afraid in the presence of urgent danger. He is excited, aroused, full of anxiety, but fear is something quite different. The Commandant laughed and answered, Bah! I assure you that I was afraid. Then the man of the tanned countenance addressed us deliberately as follows. Permit to me explain fear, and the bullest man may feel fear. Is something horrible and atrocious sensation, a sort of decomposition of the soul, a terrible spasm of brain and heart, the very memory of which brings a shudder of anguish. But when one is brave, he feels it neither under fire, nor in the presence of sure death, nor in the face of well-known danger. It springs up under certain abnormal conditions, under certain mysterious influences in the presence of vague peril. Real fear is a sort of reminiscence of the fantastic terror of the past. A man who believes in ghosts and imagines he sees a spectre in the darkness must feel fear in all its horror. As for me, I was overwhelmed with fear in a broad daylight, about 10 years ago and again one December night last winter. Nevertheless, I have gone through many dangers, many adventures which seemed to promise death. I have often been in battle, I have been left for dead by thieves. In America, I was condemned as an insurgent to be hanged, and off the coast of China, I had been thrown into the sea from the deck of a ship. Each time I thought I was lost, I at once decided upon once my course action without regret or weakness. That is not fear. I have felt it in Africa, and yet it is a child of the north. The sunlight banishes it like the mist. Consider the fact, gentlemen. Among the Orientals, life has no value. Resignation is natural. The nights are clear and empty of the somber spirit of unrest which haunts the brain in the cooler lands. In the Orient, panic is known but not fear. Well then, here's the incident that befell me in Africa. I was crossing the great sands to the south of Nargala. It is one of the most curious districts in the world. You have seen the solid continuous sand of the endless ocean strands. Well, imagine the ocean itself turned to sand in the midst of storm. Imagine a silent tempest with motionless billows of yellow dust. They are high as mountains, these uneven varied surges, rising exactly like unchained billows but still larger, and stratified like water silk on this wild, silent, and motionless sea. The consuming rays of the tropical sun are poured pitilessly and directly. You have to climb these streaks of red-hot ash, descend again on the other side, climb again, climb without halt, without repose, without shade. The horses cough, sink to their knees, and slide down the sides of the remarkable hills. We were a couple of friends, followed by 8 Spazis and 4 camels with their drivers. We were no longer talking, overcome by heat, fatigue, and a thirst such as had produced this burning desert. Suddenly one of our men uttered a cry. We all halted, surprised by an unsolved phenomenon known only to travelers in these trackless wastes. Somewhere near us, in an interminable direction, a drum was rolling, the mysterious drum of the sands. It was beating distinctly, now with greater resonance, and again feebler, ceasing, then resumed its uncanny roll. The Arabs, terrified, stared at one another, and one said in his language, Death is upon us, as he spoke. My companion, my friend, almost a brother, dropped from his horse, falling face downward on the sand, overcome by sunstroke. And for 2 hours, while I tried in vain to save him, this weird drum filled my ears with its monotonous, intermittent, and incomprehensible tone. I felt lay hold of my bones. Fear, real fear, hideous fear, in the presence of this beloved corpse in this hole scorched by the sun, surrounded by 4 mountains of sand and 200 leagues from any French settlement, while echoes assailed our ears with this furious drumbeat. On that day, I realized what fear was, but since then, I have had another and still more vivid experience. A commandment interrupted the speaker. I beg your pardon, but what was the drum? The traveler replied, I cannot say, no one knows. Our officers are often surprised by the singular noise and attributed generally to the echo produced by a hail of grains of sand blown by the wind against the dry and brittle leaves of weeds, for it has always been noticed that the phenomenon occurs in proximity to little plants burned by the sun and hard as parchment. This sound seems to have been magnified, multiplied, and swelled beyond measure in its progress through the valleys of sand, and the drum therefore might be considered a sort of sound mirage. Nothing more. But I did not know that until later. I shall proceed to my second instance. It was last winter, in a forest of the northeast of France. The sky was so overcast that night came 2 hours earlier than usual. My guide was a peasant who walked beside me along the narrow road, under the vault of fir trees through which the wind infernally howled between the treetops. I saw the fleeting clouds which seemed to hasten as if escaped some object of terror, sometimes in a fierce gust of wind. The whole forest blowed, and in the same direction with a groan of pain, and a chill laid hold of me, despite my rapid pace and heavy clothing. We were to sup and sleep at an old gamekeeper's house not much further on. I had come out for hunting. My guide sometimes raised his eyes and murmured, ugly weather. Then he told me about the people among whom we were supposed to spend the night. The father had killed a poacher 2 years before, and since then he had been gloomy and behaved as though haunted by a memory. His 2 sons were married and lived with him. Darkness was profound. I could see nothing before me, nor around me, and the mass of overhanging, interlacing trees rubbed together, filling the night with an incessant whispering. Finally I saw a light, and soon my companion was knocking upon the door. Sharp women's voices answered us, then a man's voice, a choking voice, asked, who goes there? My guide gave his name. We entered and beheld a remote picture. An old man with the white hair, wild eyes, and loaded gun in his hand stood waiting for us in the middle of the kitchen, while 2 sturdy, loose, armed with axes, guarded the door. In the somber corners I distinguished 2 women kneeling with faces to the wall. Matters were explained, and the old man stood again against the wall, at the same time ordering that a room be prepared for me. Then, as the woman did not stir, look you, monsieur, said he, 2 years ago this night I killed a man, and last year he came back to haunt me. I expect him again, tonight. Then he added in a tone that made me smile, and so we are somewhat excited. I reassured him as best that I could, happy to have arrived on a particular evening and to witness the superstitious terror. I told stories and almost succeeded in calming the whole household. Near the fireplace slept an old dog, mustached and almost blind, with his head between his paws. Such a dog reminds you people you have known. Outside, the raging storm was beating against the little house, and suddenly, through a small pane of glass, a sort of peep window placed near the door, I saw a brilliant flash of lightning, a whole mass of trees thrashed by the wind. In spite of my efforts, I realized that terror was laying hold of these people, and each time that I ceased to speak, all ears listened for distant sounds. Annoyed at these foolish fears, I was about to retire to my bed when the old gamekeeper suddenly leaped from his chair, seized the gun, and stammered wildly, "There he is! There he is! I hear him." The 2 women again sank upon their knees in the corner and hid their faces while the son took up the axes. I am going to try to pacify them once more. When the sleeping dog awakened suddenly, and raising his head and stretching his neck, looked at the fire with his dim eyes and uttered one of those mournful howls which make travelers shudder in the darkness. Solitude of the country. All eyes were focused upon him now as he rose on the front feet as though haunted by a vision. Began to howl at something visible, unknown, and doubtless horrible, for he was bristling all over. The gamekeeper with livid face cried, "He scents him! He scents him!" He was there when I killed him. The 2 women, terrified, began to wail in concert with the dog. In spite of myself, cold chills ran down my spine. The vision of the animal at such a time and place in the midst of these startled people was something frightful to witness. Then for an hour the dog howled without stirring. He howled as though in the anguish of a nightmare. Fear, horrible fear came over me. Fear of what? How can I say? It was fear, and this is all I know. We remained motionless and pale, expecting something awful to happen. Our ears were strained and our hearts beat loudly, while the slightest noise startled us. Then the beast began to walk around the room, sniffing at the walls and growling constantly. His maneuvers were driving us mad. The countryman who had brought the meal thither in approximate rage seized the dog, carrying him to a door to open into a small court, thrusting forth. The noise was suppressed, and we were left plunged in a silence still more terrible. Then suddenly we were all startled. Someone was gliding along the outside wall toward the forest. Then he seemed to be feeling in the door with trembling hand, and for 2 minutes nothing was heard, and we almost lost our minds. We returned, still feeling along the wall, scratched lightly upon the door as a child might do with his fingernails. Suddenly a face appeared behind the glass of the peep window, a white face with eyes shining like those of the cat tribe. A sound was heard, an indistinctive plaintive murmur. Then there was a formidable burst of noise in the kitchen. The old gamekeeper had fired. The two sons at once rushed forward and barricaded the window with the great table, reinforcing it with the buffet. I swear to you that at the shock of the gun's discharge, what I did not expect, such an anguish laid a hold on my heart, my soul, and my very body that I felt myself about to fall, about to die from fear. We remained there till dawn, unable to move. In short, seized by an indescribable numbness of the brain. No one dared to remove the barricade until a thin ray of sunlight appeared through a crack in the back room. At the base of the wall and under the window we found the old dog lying dead, skull shattered by a ball. He had escaped from the little court by digging a hole under a fence. The dark facade man became silent, and he added, "And yet on that night I incurred no danger, but I should rather gain past through all the hours in which I had confronted the most terrible perils than the 1 minute when that gun was discharged at the bearded head in the window." The end. Thank you for your time.